night, Buckeyes! Hey, everybody. What's happening? Another beautiful Saturday to be a fan of the Scarlet and Gray. Welcome back. It's another episode of the Buckeye broadcast with yours truly, Emmet Brady. Week numero cinco, week 5 here in the 2017 season for the Ohio State Buckeyes. By the way, if you're ever wondering, I'm just giving a little shout out to the great football broadcaster Keith Jackson with that Whoa Nelly. Not a perfect impersonation, but it's close enough for the time being. And tonight the Bucks go on the road, heading over to New Jersey to play the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Another Big Ten matchup, second one of the season for the Bucks. Coming off a big performance, predictable performance, a record-breaking performance against UNLV last week. The Bucks looked really good. They scored all kinds of points and touchdowns. It would have been much more of a blowout had they kept throttling up the first team. They brought the second team in for most of the second half, even into the second quarter. But the good news is that JT Barrett woke up. They played a lot of great offense. It was kind of clicking on all cylinders. Not against the best defense in the country by any means. UNLV is a good team. They actually put up 21 points, of which 7 were bona fide, great drives. No, I would say 14 points look good, And the Buckeyes defense, they did their job, but they really brought in the second team early on. I think that's really important at this point in the season to give the second team and younger players some experience. Got some backup QB snaps in there. JT Barrett really broke some serious records last week, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Get ready for tonight's game against Rutgers. And the DAYMA theme to this week on the broadcast, each podcast we take a moment to talk about a health, fitness, and performance topic through the lens of the DAYMA system. DAYMA is an acronym for dance, athletics, yoga, and movement arts. And today we're going to talk about bruises, a really common thing that happens from time to time in daily life and when you're exercising, when you're competing, when you're performing. How can you handle it? What is it? What's the best way to deal with a bruise? So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But like I said, what was great about the Buckeyes' performance is I think this was one of those games when the coaching staff felt comfortable enough to have a plan A and a plan B that got executed, where the players that need to back up, there's a lot of injuries throughout the course of a season. Sometimes players just don't perform well. They need to take a break off. Remember, these kids are young. Most of them are under 22 years of age. So, these are definitely young people, young men. And JT Barrett, he threw 5 TDs in the first half. That's a record setter. He also came number 2 all-time in the career passing yards at Ohio State. So pretty much all-time quarterbacks at Ohio State, I'd have to say Mr. Barrett is right at the top here. Now, there's 2 ways to look at record-breaking days. On one hand, everybody wants to win the championship. I have a little different view on a football season. It's great to win a championship, but every year only one team can win the entire thing. Every year one team can win the Big Ten. And that does not discount the fantastic athleticism, the effort, the dedication, the sacrifice that these players, coaches, families, fans, and bands go through, right? So even if it winds out that the Bucks are not necessarily one of the best teams in the country this year, they're at the 5th week of the season. I would not say they're even the best team in the Big Ten right now. They could be. The defense has not performed to the level that people expected to, I don't think. Nick Bosa called for a shutout at UNLV, but that didn't happen. And I also think there's a lot more parity in the nation right now. So, of course, Alabama is still dominant at the top. Tonight, Clemson plays Virginia Tech, so one of those 2 will lose. USC lost to Washington State last night, so the top 10, the top 25 keeps shaking up. I think right now, pound for pound, Penn State is the best team in the Big Ten. And Michigan looks good too. The Buckeyes look good. But then there's some other teams that are playing well. Rutgers tonight, not too much of a concern. But before we get to that, 209 yards passing for Barrett. They were pretty simple touchdowns, 5 touchdowns to 7 different receivers wound up catching touchdowns for the Buckeyes. That was a great performance. Good news, too, not a ton of injuries. Oh, the Big Ten records that they broke. 7 players caught touchdowns. Paris Sanders really broke out. I think the 2 players, besides the running game, who really need to step up, Paris Campbell, KJ Hill, and Bauman, the tight end. I think they really need to get him more involved in the offense. I think he's being underutilized. I think he underperforms because he doesn't get enough snaps and passes. But we had a defensive touchdown too last week. That was really good. You don't expect too much from. I think we had 3 interceptions total in the game. The Rebels did score, and that says that, they're a team that knows how to put it up. Their quarterback Haskins, that was the Buckeyes' backup quarterback. He actually, came in replace of JT Barrett and threw for almost as many yards, 228 yards as a matter of fact. Actually, I think he did more. But that's a good thing to see. He did show promise as a backup. I don't think he has the mobility. I don't think he has the field smarts yet, of course, that JT Barrett has, but that was great. And the good news, too, Joe Burrow, who's been out since training camp, the real number 2 on the team, he threw 4 passes, completed them all, and that looks great, So, again, everybody's still stinging from the loss to Oklahoma, but in a seasoned veteran sort of fan appreciation, it was a good thing that they lost that early. I don't think they could have gone late in the season without a wake-up call, and now they're going to play to win every game, and they're going to hopefully, win at least everything at home, make a shot for the Big Ten championship. Still very much in the driver's seat to do that as well. So against Rutgers tonight, I don't think it's another game where I don't think they have too much to worry about. Now, Rutgers has improved dramatically in the Big Ten. I think the whole Big Ten is better than it was last year. But the Buckeyes, since the Rutgers Scarlet Knights came over to the Big Ten, they historically have been clobbered by the Bucks by averages of 30 points or more. One year it was 58-0. Last year 49-7. And JT Barrett puts up huge numbers against the Scarlet Knights. Now, part of the reasons why, you might not know this, Greg Schiano, the defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes, was the head coach over at Rutgers for a long time. So he is going to be honored by the team, as a matter of fact, when they get over there. But it's in New Jersey tonight. So I don't think there's too much. I guess the Bucks are favored by over 30. I think this running back thing's got to get hashed out because everybody knows that JT Barrett has underplayed and that JT Dobbins has been really amazing as a freshman. He's really one of the best running backs in the country, probably the best freshman running back in the country right now. But you have Mike Weber, who is a tremendous resource and I think is being really underutilized. One of the things that Weber does well is he blocks very well. And JT Barrett's decision-making has not been 100% so far. The big question is, can the Bucks stretch the field? Can they throw the 20-plus yard passes consistently, even the ones, down the sidelines, 50 yards plus? And if they can do that, if they can prove that over the next few games, guys like KJ Hill start to show up, and they start to really test the deep backs on the opposing team. I think the Buckeye season could come together really nicely because the running game is very well established, and JT Dobbins he can create stuff on his own. That's an amazing part to watch when you watch him run as a freshman. He has great field instincts. If he plays past his sophomore year at Ohio State, I'll be surprised, but I sure hope he sticks around. And, against Rutgers, their offense is good. Their defense is pretty terrible. So we're gonna see basically. Well, actually, the biggest problem for Rutgers this year has been their inability to move the ball. So actually, on both sides of the ball, they have some problems. But, I think that some of the things that Rutgers can probably focus on against the Buckeyes is if they can test the young deep backs against Ohio State. I think they could look pretty good. Now at the end of the day, there's only a couple of performers on Rutgers who I think are going to be able to pull anything off to threaten the Buckeyes. There has been a little bit of a quarterback controversy. Kyle Bolin is a transfer to Rutgers. He's their starting quarterback, but he has greatly underplayed. And they have an underclassman named Jonathan Lewis, I believe, who's gotten a few snaps. And They want to see him. He's much more physical, not much of a touch passer, a larger quarterback, maybe a little stronger than Bolin. And there's some talk in Rutgers about getting him more reps. They got a couple of NFL-type players. Have a tight end who's impressive. Jerome Lewis, I believe his name is, a big guy. I'm sorry, we'll try that again. Is Jerome Washington, and just haven't gotten enough balls to him. So he could become a big part of their offense tonight. The Buckeyes' front four should be able to shut down the Rutgers offense pretty well. And on defense, I don't think there's a lot of problems. If the Buckeyes click on offense, Rutgers has played pretty well against the short pass, but they're really susceptible to giving up the long ball. And this is where the read option by JT Barrett can really be effective against Rutgers. So I still would like to see somebody on the Buckeyes step up for the 7 to 15, 7 to 20 yard passes on a consistent basis. And this is the kind of thing where there's somebody getting 7 to 10, maybe 15 attempts a game, pulling in more than half of those, and then you're going to start putting up the yardage. JT Barrett needs a go-to guy who can stretch the field, and I think tonight's going to be a good game to see if that shows up. Last week was not the right defense to test it against, so when you go long against a team, it can sting. It can set them off of their. It's very demoralizing. It leaves kind of a bruise. There's a lot of ways to get bruised in football. A lot of ways to get bruised in daily life. You can get emotionally bruised, you get physically bruised, and that's what today's DAYMA topic is. Now, a bruise, technically is a type of contusion, which is a subdermal bleeding. Everybody knows what a bruise is. We get them all the time. A little poke, the misstep, a twisted ankle, a bump in the head. These can all leave bruises. And basically, it's the small blood vessels and capillaries underneath the skin. They hemorrhage, they crack, they open, they bleed, and there's no lesion in the skin, so the blood doesn't come out you don't see the blood, but you can certainly feel it. Now, bruises are very, very an important part of everyday life. They're easy to get, and they're kind of easy to get rid of, but there are some things you want to look for, and in the DAYMA system, since we focus so much on soft tissue, a bruise is really an interesting opportunity to get to learn about your body, because the interstitial tissue, it's the stuff between the muscles and the skin, and the fascia is one of those tissues that helps capture and coagulate fluids and even retain the blood, because whenever you hurt yourself, your body sort of wraps around the injury so you don't re-injure yourself. And the idea with bruises is that the blood doesn't get flushed out of the tissues quickly enough. Now, if it's a light bruise, the color might be yellow or brown. Of course, darker bruises get, all the way from red to deep purple, and you can sort of see how your bruise is improving when the colors start to change. That means your body is flushing out the old dead cells, red blood cells that are stagnant and sort of sitting in the tissue. But when you go to rub a bruise, it's a real good indication, if you rub it a lot and it still gets more sore, that it might be more going on than just a deep bruise. You could have hurt a muscle or a nerve a lot worse. I had one earlier in the year that was absolutely weird. My leg cramped up one night. I'd worked out, I'd swam, and I went out dancing all in one night. And by around midnight, I might have been a little dehydrated, not even quite sure how it happened, but all of a sudden my right quadricep just bunched up, it knotted up, and the next week I had a bruise almost up the entire length of my thigh. It was very troubling, really worrisome for a few days, but what I did was I have the same system. Now they talk about RICE, R-I-C-E, which is rest, ice, compress, and elevate, right? That's the basic treatment of a bruise. And sometimes they recommend painkillers as well. But what I talk about is the difference between a cold pack and what's called an ice rub. So if you get a bruise where you can spread out and disperse the blood under the skin, rather than a joint or something that needs just a real localized injury, take a piece of ice and rub it along your skin. And while you're doing that, the first couple days you want to be nice and light on the surface, but then as you get into it, you can start to push a little bit harder and really start to feel what kind of damage might be done under the bruise. I'm not a doctor, but I like to suggest what I do when I get any kind of a bruise or inflammation, especially if it seems to be affecting the movement of my limbs or my range of motion. First 2 days, 800 milligrams, that's 4 tablets of ibuprofen twice a day. And then after that, day 3, I start to taper down 600, day 4, 400, day 5, 200 or less. And generally within a week, the pain, the bruising is gone. With that injury, though, it took me 10 days, and it was literally, the bruise was in there for 10 days. So I must have really done something pretty extreme when it knotted up, when I got that a contusion as the result of a strain or a cramp is probably what happened. So just make sure, no matter what you're doing, you can't ever over ice your body. For the most part, anytime your joints are sore or stiff, you sit down with 5-10 minutes a day with ice directly on it. It can certainly help over time, and you got to do it on a regular basis. It doesn't happen right away. Anybody who's an athlete or a performer knows you have to be patient when you get an injury, and a bruise can sometimes just slow you down, but it's there. If you don't try and treat it, it's hard to ignore because it can be real painful, and it's very unsightly as well. So it kind of reminds you that you got to take some time and fix it. So with that said, thanks for tuning in. I don't think tonight's game is going to be a real big issue. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to be online tonight. I've got an event that I was invited to, and it starts just about game time here in Northeast Ohio. So I will not be on Facebook play-by-play. I'll try and tune in when I can. But, if it's going to be a repeat of previous games, I think it's a 30-point spread. I always think teams in the Big Ten want to play big against the Buckeyes so they could show up. But I just don't think there's enough offensive mojo right now in Rutgers to make it happen. I think we're going to look at another a 40-plus point performance by the Buckeyes. I think it's going to be 48, and I don't think Rutgers is going to get even on the past 10 points. I think it's going to be 48-7. Now, last week I would have nailed the score, except I picked 53-7. I think is what it was, and then late in the game, the Rutgers put on some points on the board, so I was a little disappointed. I thought I had nailed the score perfectly, but 48-7. Go Buckeyes. They're going to roll over the Scarlet Knights. Remember, every day is a great day to be a fan of the Scarlet and Gray, and if you want to join the healthiest football fans in the land, check in with me on my website, meetemmet.com/DAYMA, and I do a live web stream on Facebook twice a day, the DAYMA stretch routine at 12 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Eastern as well. I'm going to miss that one tonight, of course, because of my event. But more than anything else, I just got to say, take stock of being healthy every day. Make sure that if you have a good time this weekend, you're safe and you're there to support the Buckeyes. All right, let's go Buckeyes. OHIO. See you soon.